You were not born to crawl, nor to beg life for scraps. You were born to reign. The moment you assumed the posture of victory, you declared to the universe that defeat has no place in your story. Act therefore as though you were meant to win, for in truth you were. Everything you experience without is a reflection of what you have assumed within. If you walk as though the promise were already fulfilled, your world must align to reflect that conviction. Winning is not the result of struggle, it is the natural outcome of belief. Your assumption, held with persistence, is the secret law that bends circumstances in your favor. Close your eyes and see yourself already in possession of what you desire. Feel it as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Let the tone of your inner conversations be one of triumph, not of doubt. Carry yourself as the victorious man, the accomplished woman, the one who has already secured the crown. The outer world is compelled to conform to the image you sustain within. Do not wait for evidence to prove your victory. Evidence comes after the assumption, never before. The world will call it arrogance, but it is simply faith, faith in your divine right to win. You were never meant to live small. You were meant to embody greatness, to act in harmony with the truth that you are already victorious. So tonight, dare to act like the winner you were created to be. Assume it, walk in it, live from it. For when you act like you were meant to win, life has no choice but to crown you with victory. You were born to reign, not to crawl. Within you lies the seat of power, authority, and dominion over every circumstance of life. Crawling belongs to one who has forgotten his true inheritance, but reigning belongs to the one who remembers he is the master of his world. To reign is to stand tall in the imagination, to carry yourself with the quiet assurance that all things are subject to your assumption. The world bends, not to weakness, but to strength of conviction. When you act as though you are destined for greatness, everything begins to shift in your favor. Outer reality reflects inner assumption. For the world you see with your eyes is nothing more than the projection of what you have dared to accept as true within yourself. Every circumstance, every encounter, every opportunity is molded and shaped by the state you occupy inwardly. When you assume wealth, life arranges itself to present you with channels of abundance. When you assume love, people and situations align to mirror that feeling back to you. It is never the outer that governs the inner, but always the inner that gives birth to the outer. You carry within your imagination the creative workshop of the universe, and there the blueprint of your life is drawn. To dwell on lack, fear, or failure is to summon them into tangible form. For assumption clothed in feeling becomes the reality you must meet. Yet to live from the end, to walk and speak as though your desire were already fulfilled, is to set in motion unseen currents that build the stage of your victory. The invisible belief you hold is the architect of the visible experience, and your world cannot help but display the silent conviction of your inner state. Victory is not earned by struggle, but by belief. For struggle is the effort of one who does not yet trust in the unseen law that governs all manifestation. Struggle implies resistance, the belief that something stands outside of you with power to delay or deny what you desire. But belief is effortless acceptance, a calm certainty that what you imagine with conviction must come to pass. When you believe, you cease to strain, because you understand that the seed of your assumption already contains the harvest within it. Just as an acorn does not struggle to become an oak, so too does your assumption not struggle to become reality. Belief is the invisible force that determines the shape and direction of your world. It is not the size of the obstacle that matters, but the depth of the assumption you hold within. One who believes himself victorious walks differently, speaks differently, and thinks from a position of accomplishment rather than defeat. This inner alignment calls forth conditions, people, and opportunities that harmonize with the image sustained in the imagination. Struggle says, I must work harder to force life to bend. But belief says, life bends because I already am. To rest in belief is to know the battle is won before it even begins. It is to understand that no outer fact has power except the meaning you grant it. Circumstances may appear unfavorable, yet belief ignores appearances and holds fast to the unseen reality. The world is but a shadow, and shadows cannot resist the light of conviction. When belief is complete, effort is replaced by knowing, and knowing transforms itself into the visible triumph of the state you dared to assume. Imagination is the seed of every fulfilled desire, for nothing exists in the visible world that was not first conceived in the invisible realm of thought. Every invention, every work of art, every movement of progress began in the quiet chambers of the mind where an image was first entertained. To imagine is to plant, and to sustain that image with feeling is to water the seed until it grows into form. The unseen reality within you is always the cause, and what you call outer circumstances are only the shadows cast by what you have dared to envision inwardly. When you imagine, you step into the creative act that mirrors the divine. The world responds not to your effort or your striving, but to the quality and persistence of your inner pictures. If you imagine yourself lacking, then lack becomes the fruit. If you imagine yourself loved, successful, and free, then these conditions must appear in your world as naturally as a tree springs from its seed. The seed does not question how it will become a tree. It simply grows according to the pattern hidden within it. So too, your imagination holds the pattern of your desire already completed, waiting only for your acceptance. Imagination is not fantasy, nor idle daydreaming, but the deliberate assumption of a state which, though unseen, is felt as real. To enter imagination with faith is to bypass appearances, and to live from the end where the desire is already yours. This inner experience impresses itself upon the subconscious mind, and the subconscious, being without resistance, brings forth in outer form that which has been impressed upon it. Life cannot help but yield to the image sustained with conviction, for imagination is the workshop of creation itself. Every fulfilled desire was first an inner act of seeing, feeling, and knowing. You cannot reap what you have not planted. But once you have planted the seed of imagination and nourished it with belief, the harvest is certain. The outer world is powerless to resist the reality that has already been accepted within, for imagination is the true beginning of all manifestation. Assume the feeling of victory before evidence appears, for the unseen world within is always the cause of what unfolds without. Evidence belongs to the realm of shadow, but assumption belongs to the realm of substance. To wait for proof before believing is to live as a servant of circumstances, but to believe before seeing is to command circumstances to obey the image you hold. When you assume victory inwardly, you clothe yourself in the reality of accomplishment, and life must respond in harmony with that inner decree. The feeling of victory is not dependent on outer results. It is a state of consciousness you choose to occupy now, long before the world reflects it back. Consider how a king sits upon his throne. He does not wait for his subjects to crown him before he feels royal. He sits in majesty because he knows he is king, and that knowing produces the outer recognition of his rule. In the same way, when you carry yourself with the calm assurance that you have already won, you set in motion the events that make that victory visible. Outer proof lags behind inner conviction, but it cannot resist it, for consciousness is the only reality. The mind that insists on waiting for evidence lives in doubt, and doubt multiplies delay. Yet the mind that assumes and persists in the assumption compresses time and compels results. To feel victorious is to walk, speak, and think as though nothing could stand in your way. It is to hold conversations within yourself that echo the language of success, never rehearsing defeat, never entertaining failure, but continually affirming that the crown is already yours. This inner dialogue is the foundation of your destiny, for what you accept as true in imagination must one day appear in your world. Do not be deceived by appearances that contradict your assumption, for they are but echoes of old states you once entertained. Let them pass, and remain faithful to the inner feeling of victory. The outer will catch up in due time, and when it does, it will seem effortless, as though it had always been that way. To assume victory is not to deny reality, but to create it, for reality is only the outpicturing of belief. Practice entering into the end of your desire. Close your eyes and feel what it would be like were you already in possession of your goal. Let the sensation fill you until it becomes more real than what your senses report. Live from that state daily, and the invisible victory will take shape in visible form. The world cannot refuse the one who assumes with persistence, for assumption, sustained with conviction, is the law by which all things are brought to pass. Inner conversations shape outer conditions, because the dialogue you hold within yourself becomes the script from which your life is acted out. Every word whispered in the secrecy of your imagination is a seed planted in the fertile ground of the subconscious, and once planted, it must grow. These conversations may seem private, hidden from the eyes and ears of others, yet they carry a creative power that molds the very fabric of your reality. The world you encounter is but a mirror reflecting the tone and content of the inner words you continually repeat, and the conditions of your life cannot help but echo the story you tell yourself in silence. When you rehearse defeat within, when you dwell on worry, complaint, or fear, you invite these states to crystallize into events and encounters. A mind that habitually entertains lack will find lack at its doorstep, while a mind that converses with itself in wealth and confidence will discover doors opening to abundance. These conversations do not need to be loud or dramatic. Even the quiet mutterings of self-doubt shape the stage of your life. To speak inwardly of limitation is to build walls around yourself, but to speak inwardly of victory is to tear those walls down and replace them with gateways. You are always engaged in dialogue with yourself, whether you are conscious of it or not. Each time you relive an old memory, argue with someone in imagination, or justify your position in silence, you are planting seeds that will ripen into future circumstances. Life does not respond to the outer mask you wear, it responds to the inner tone that you sustain. If your conversations are rooted in assurance, gratitude, and fulfillment, you will notice your world softening and aligning to reflect those qualities back to you. If your conversations are rooted in fear, anger, or doubt, then your world must also mirror that state. To take control of your life, you must first take control of the words you allow to circulate within. Begin to notice the pattern of your inner dialogue. Do you continually imagine yourself explaining failure, justifying lack, or predicting disappointment? If so, you are giving life to a future you do not desire. Replace those conversations with words of triumph. Imagine yourself telling a friend how wonderfully things have worked out, how easily opportunities appeared, how natural your success feels. Play that scene again and again until it feels real, until your subconscious accepts it as fact. Neville Goddard taught that the most important conversations you will ever have are the ones you hold with yourself. It is not enough to think abstractly of success. You must hear it, feel it, and live it inwardly. Let your mind rehearse the joy of fulfillment, the relief of answered prayers, the pride of accomplishment. Speak to yourself as the person who has already achieved, and the conditions of your life will rise to meet that assumption. Your inner conversations are the architects of your destiny. Each word, each phrase, each imagined exchange is constructing tomorrow's stage. To change the outer, you must change the inner. Refuse to repeat dialogues of defeat and deliberately cultivate dialogues of triumph. As you persist in this practice, you will find the people you meet, the opportunities you encounter, and the circumstances that surround you all begin to harmonize with the victorious conversation you now sustain. Within faith is acting as though the outcome is already secured. For faith does not wait upon outer evidence to move. It creates the very evidence by the certainty with which it lives. To act in faith is to take upon yourself the state of the wish fulfilled, and to carry it with the dignity of one who already possesses the prize. It is not hope, which lingers in uncertainty, nor desire, which often lives in longing, but the confident acceptance that what has been imagined is as good as done. Faith clothes the invisible with reality by refusing to acknowledge anything contrary to the conviction of fulfillment. When you walk in faith, you live from the end rather than toward it. You no longer see your goal as something distant, separated from you by time and struggle. You feel it as present, near, and natural. The man of faith speaks from victory, not toward it. He no longer prays as one begging for what he lacks, but thanks as one who knows it is already his. The woman of faith does not carry herself in hesitation or doubt, but with the quiet assurance that life must conform to the image she has already accepted. Faith, then, is not passive waiting but active embodiment of the unseen reality. The outer world, which so many regard as fixed, is pliable under the hand of faith. Appearances that seem immovable bend when met with the inner certainty of one who acts as though the promise is fulfilled. If you are sick and imagine health, to walk in faith is to live, speak, and act as though vitality already flows through you. If you are poor and imagine abundance, to walk in faith is to move with the confidence of one who knows his supply is limitless. It is not pretending, it is creating, for creation begins not in what the senses report, but in what imagination accepts as true. Faith asks you to ignore the evidence of delay, opposition, or contradiction, for these are but the fading remnants of old states you once entertained. To allow them to dictate your conviction is to surrender to shadows. To act in faith is to let those shadows pass while holding steady to the light of your inner assumption. You may see nothing outwardly to support your belief, yet the conviction within you becomes the cause that compels the outer to rearrange itself. The world cannot remain as it is when met with unwavering faith, for faith is the substance of things hoped for, and the evidence of things not seen. Acting as though the outcome is secured requires discipline of thought and imagination. It requires you to watch the conversations you carry within, the emotions you indulge, and the posture of your being. Do you carry yourself as though you are waiting for life to bless you, or as though you are already blessed? Do you speak of your future as uncertain, or do you affirm with confidence that it is done? Every thought, every word, every gesture testifies to the state you occupy, and faith demands that all these align with fulfillment rather than lack. Faith is not built in a moment, but strengthened by persistence. Each time you return to the state of the wish fulfilled, you deepen the roots of belief. Each time you refuse to be moved by appearances, you confirm that the unseen is more real to you than the seen. The more you persist, the more natural the state becomes, until it no longer feels like effort, but the most natural posture of your being. In that moment, manifestation is inevitable, for what is fully accepted within must take form without. To live in faith is to live in freedom, for you are no longer bound by appearances, no longer a victim of circumstances. You have discovered the secret that life bends to assumption, and with this knowledge, you are liberated from the tyranny of chance. Faith is the master key, the invisible force that bridges imagination and manifestation. It is the confident stride of one who knows that his vision is reality, though the world has not yet caught up. It is the calm smile of one who no longer wonders if it will happen, but rests in the certainty that it already has. Persistence in assumption brings inevitable manifestation, because assumption is the seed of reality, and persistence is the water that guarantees its growth. Every desire begins as an unseen state, held first within imagination, and it is through repeated acceptance of that state that it hardens into fact. One fleeting thought or casual daydream does not carry the power to restructure your world, but a sustained, deliberate assumption, revisited again and again with faith, cannot be denied. The subconscious, which shapes the course of your life, responds not to momentary impulses, but to the persistent tones impressed upon it, and once impressed, it must outpicture them as the conditions of your life. To persist in assumption means to remain loyal to the unseen reality, even when appearances mock it. It means to carry yourself in the conviction that what you have imagined is already yours, and to return to that conviction whenever doubts, fears, or contrary evidence arise. The world is full of shifting shadows, and those shadows will tempt you to abandon your assumption. But persistence refuses to be moved. It knows that appearances are only the remnants of past beliefs, fading echoes of states you once entertained, and that the new state, once assumed with consistency, must become visible. Persistence does not strain, for strain implies doubt. True persistence is calm, steady, and unwavering. It is the quiet return, again and again, to the end desired, refusing to let go of the feeling of fulfillment. Just as a sculptor chips away piece by piece until the statue emerges, so persistence chisels away at contrary thoughts until only the assumption of victory remains. The moment you persistently live from the end, you create an inner atmosphere that demands outward reflection. Life cannot help but yield to the dominant assumption that governs your state of being. Consider how habits are formed. A single action repeated once leaves little mark, but repeated daily it becomes second nature. So too with assumption. To persist is to transform the state of desire into a natural way of being. At first, it may feel unnatural to assume wealth when outer conditions speak of lack, or to assume health when the body complains of sickness. But with persistence, the assumption sinks into the subconscious and becomes effortless. Once it feels natural, manifestation follows as surely as dawn follows night. The law of assumption works with mathematical precision, and persistence is the formula that ensures results. Many abandon their desires not because the law failed, but because they ceased to persist. They allowed appearances to convince them that nothing was happening, unaware that the unseen roots of their assumption were already taking hold beneath the surface. Just as a seed does not sprout overnight, but requires time beneath the soil, so too does your assumption need persistence before it rises into view. To uproot it with doubt is to destroy the harvest, but to persist is to guarantee it. Persistence is the difference between wishful thinking and creative faith. Wishing flutters and fades, tossed about by every appearance, while persistence anchors itself in the end. Wishing looks at the evidence and despairs, but persistence declares, "It is done," and remains unmoved until the world agrees. Persistence is not blind stubbornness, it is wisdom, for it knows the law and trusts the process. The persistent one no longer questions when or how, for those belong to the outer realm. He concerns himself only with the inner state, faithfully returning to the feeling of fulfillment, confident that life must obey. To persist in assumption is to live deliberately. It is to choose each day the state you will occupy and to return to it again and again until it becomes your dwelling place. Every time the mind wanders into fear or doubt, persistence gently brings it back. Every time appearances contradict the inner vision, persistence affirms that appearances are temporary, but assumption is eternal. With each return, the inner conviction deepens, and with each deepening, the outer world moves closer to alignment. Manifestation is not a matter of chance, nor is it a gift reserved for the few. It is the inevitable outcome of assumption sustained through persistence. When you understand this, you no longer treat your desires as fragile hopes, but as certainties waiting to be realized. You persist not with desperation but with calm assurance, knowing that life must mirror the state you occupy most consistently. What you persistently assume becomes your nature, and what becomes your nature must become your world. Persistence in assumption is the secret of every great achievement. It is the unseen labor of the mind that refuses to release its vision. The dreamer who persists becomes the achiever, because he knows that reality is nothing more than imagination clothed in time. With persistence, the unseen becomes seen, the intangible becomes tangible, and the desire becomes fact. No opposition, no delay, no circumstance can withstand the steady force of one who persists in his assumption. To persist is to align yourself with the law of life itself, and in doing so, you guarantee the inevitable manifestation of all you dare to believe. Confidence is not arrogance. It is alignment with truth. For true confidence does not spring from the ego, but from the recognition of who you are in essence. Arrogance boasts loudly because it secretly doubts itself, while confidence is quiet, steady, and sure because it rests in the awareness of inner power. To be confident is to live from the truth that you already are all that you seek, that nothing outside of you has authority over your destiny, and that the states you assume within will inevitably become your experience without. Arrogance is noise, confidence is knowing. Arrogance tries to impress others. Confidence impresses upon the subconscious the certainty of fulfillment. Confidence is alignment with truth, because the truth is that you are the operant power of your life. The outer world, with all its shifting forms, cannot dictate the measure of your worth or the certainty of your victory. To believe otherwise is to give your power away to appearances. When you know the truth, that imagination creates reality, that assumption shapes experience, you stand firm regardless of circumstances. This firmness is not arrogance, it is faith in action. You are not pretending to be more than you are. You are embodying the fullness of what you already are but may have forgotten. Arrogance looks outward and says, I am greater than you. But confidence looks inward and says, I am one with the source of all creation. Arrogance demands recognition, but confidence requires none, for it knows that the recognition of others adds nothing to the truth already established within. To walk in confidence is to move through life with a calm assurance that your desires are valid, your assumptions are law, and your imagination is the key to manifestation. You no longer plead with life to favor you, you assume favor as your natural birthright. True confidence is never forced, for it grows naturally from the alignment of thought, feeling, and imagination with the desired end. When you live in the state of your wish fulfilled, confidence flows without effort, because you are no longer seeking, you are being. The world senses this quiet strength and responds to it, for people and circumstances are drawn to the one who is self-assured. Confidence creates an atmosphere of inevitability, a subtle power that moves others to cooperate with your vision, not because you demanded it, but because your inner conviction radiates outward. Confidence is the fruit of assumption made natural. At first, you may need to remind yourself to think from the end, to rehearse inner conversations of success, to carry yourself as though the promise were fulfilled. But with persistence, this assumption becomes second nature, and confidence emerges. You no longer need to strain, for the state has become your dwelling place. You wake each day with a sense of certainty, not because of outer evidence, but because the truth within you is unshakable. This kind of confidence cannot be faked, nor can it be taken away, for it does not depend on the approval of others or the fleeting success of circumstances. Arrogance falls apart when challenged, but confidence remains. When arrogance meets resistance, it reacts defensively, but when confidence meets resistance, it remains calm, for it knows that appearances are powerless against truth. Confidence does not need to dominate others, for it knows there is no competition in creation. Each person lives in the world of his own assumption, and the confident one rests in the certainty that his inner state must be expressed in outer form. Confidence also reshapes how you see challenges. To the arrogant, obstacles are threats to superiority. To the confident, obstacles are illusions, temporary shadows that cannot withstand the light of persistence. With confidence, you no longer measure progress by what you see, but by the alignment of your inner state. You trust the unseen currents moving in your favor, and you continue to act, speak, and live as though your desire were already realized. This steady alignment ensures that the outer world eventually conforms, for it has no choice but to yield to the dominant inner state. Confidence is the natural expression of living in truth. The truth is that you are not limited by circumstances, you are not defined by the past, and you are not at the mercy of chance. The truth is that you are the creator of your experience through imagination and assumption. When you align with this truth, confidence becomes as natural as breathing. It is not an act you put on, it is the atmosphere you carry. It is the silent conviction that you cannot fail, because failure does not exist in the state of fulfillment. The difference between arrogance and confidence is the difference between fear and faith. Arrogance is fear disguised as pride, always seeking to prove, always restless for validation. Confidence is faith expressed as certainty, needing no proof, content to rest in the unseen until it becomes seen. Arrogance says, "Look at me," but confidence says, "I know who I am." One is brittle and easily broken, the other is steady and unshakable. Confidence allows you to move deliberately in the world, unhurried yet unstoppable. It guides your choices, strengthens your persistence, and empowers your imagination. You begin to speak with authority, not because you are trying to convince others, but because you have convinced yourself. You carry yourself differently, not to display superiority, but because you cannot help but reflect the inner truth of victory. This shift is noticed and doors begin to open, not by force, but by the quiet magnetism of a confident state of being. Confidence is not arrogance. It is alignment with truth. And when you align with truth, you no longer need to defend, prove, or strive. You only need to persist in the inner conviction that what you have assumed is already accomplished, and the outer world will testify to that conviction. Confidence is the law of assumption embodied in daily life. the calm assurance that the unseen is more real than the seen, and that every desire, once assumed with persistence, must unfold in perfect order live daily as though you were meant to win, and you will, for the posture you take toward life is the silent command that instructs your world how to respond to you. Every moment you are choosing a state, whether consciously or unconsciously, and the state you persist in becomes the environment of your existence. To live as though you were meant to win is to carry yourself with the assurance that nothing can truly oppose you, for your victory is not dependent on the outer, but on the inner conviction you sustain. Life mirrors what you assume to be true, and if you assume the role of a victor, then life must rearrange itself to prove you right. When you rise in the morning and carry the attitude of triumph into your day, you send forth an invisible vibration that orders circumstances in your favor. To think small, to speak in tones of defeat, or to walk in hesitation is to instruct the world to keep you bound. But to think from greatness, to speak words of certainty, and to move with purpose is to instruct the world to open its doors. The energy of victory is magnetic, drawing to itself people, opportunities, and events that reflect its nature. The man who lives as though he were meant to win never begs, never waits upon chance, never doubts that the outcome will favor him, for he knows that his inner assumption has already determined the result. Living daily as though you were meant to win does not mean you never encounter challenges. It means you meet challenges as though they are already conquered. Obstacles become appearances with no real substance, for you walk in the faith that your end is secure. You stop reacting with fear and begin responding with calm assurance. Every setback is treated as temporary, every delay as part of the unfolding, every difficulty as an opportunity for your conviction to deepen. The outer may shake, but the one who assumes victory remains steady, because he knows that appearances are but shadows of yesterday's thinking, and today's assumption of triumph will determine tomorrow's facts. To live as though you were meant to win is to discipline the conversations you hold within. Inner dialogue is the architect of destiny, and the words you speak to yourself shape the conditions of your life. If you spend the day imagining defeat, explaining why success has not come, or rehearsing conversations of failure, then you are instructing your subconscious to deliver more of the same. But if you persistently imagine yourself celebrated, successful and fulfilled, and if you rehearse dialogues of accomplishment and gratitude, you are impressing upon your subconscious the feeling of victory. That impression, when sustained daily, must harden into reality, for the subconscious never fails to express what has been impressed upon it. Living as though you were meant to win requires faith in the unseen. It demands that you look beyond the evidence of the senses and cling to the conviction that your assumption is greater than any temporary appearance. You may see lack, yet you carry yourself in abundance. You may see delay, yet you walk in certainty. You may see resistance, yet you speak from triumph. To the world, this looks like audacity, but to the one who understands the law, it is simply truth in action. You are not waiting for proof before you believe and proof follows. The daily practice of living from victory transforms the atmosphere of your being. You notice yourself standing taller, speaking with clarity, and moving with confidence. Others feel this energy, often without knowing why, and they respond to you with respect and cooperation. Circumstances begin to arrange themselves in ways that surprise you, not because you forced them, but because you aligned yourself with the state of a winner, and life was compelled to mirror it. This is the secret of effortless manifestation. It is not in the outer struggle, but in the inner alignment. Consider the difference between one who lives from defeat and one who lives from victory. The defeated man sees every challenge as proof of limitation, every delay as failure, every closed door as rejection. He confirms his state by his words, his posture, and his expectations, and life obliges by sending him more of what he assumes. The victorious man, however, sees challenges as illusions to be brushed aside, delays as moments of preparation, and closed doors as redirections toward better outcomes. His assumption of triumph is so consistent that even when appearances seem contrary, he remains unmoved. and eventually the world conforms to his vision. Living daily as though you were meant to win is not arrogance but humility before the truth of who you are. It is the recognition that the creative power of imagination has been entrusted to you, and that you dishonor that gift when you use it to rehearse failure. To assume victory is to honor the truth that you are a creator, not a victim of circumstances. It is to live in alignment with the reality that your desires are valid, your vision is sacred, and your assumption is the law that shapes your experience. To make this way of living practical, begin each day by entering into the state of the wish fulfilled. Before you move into action, close your eyes and imagine yourself already in possession of what you desire. Feel the satisfaction, the relief, the joy as though it were happening now. Let that feeling color your mood, your words, and your actions throughout the day. When doubts arise, return to the inner picture. When appearances contradict, affirm that they are temporary and powerless. Train yourself to return again and again to the state of victory until it becomes natural. Once natural, it is inevitable that the outer world must yield to it. You cannot live in the consciousness of defeat and expect victory, nor can you live in the consciousness of victory and experience defeat. The law is impartial, responding only to the state you persist in. To live daily as though you were meant to win is to choose the victorious state deliberately, and to return to it until it dominates your inner world. This persistence shapes your character, your confidence, and your destiny. It draws to you conditions that affirm your inner conviction and transforms your life from the inside out. When you carry yourself in victory, you stop chasing results and start attracting them. You no longer live in anxiety about when or how, for you know that the assumption of the end guarantees the means. You walk calmly, you speak boldly, and you act decisively, not because you are forcing results, but because you are certain they already exist. This certainty frees you from struggle, for you understand that the outcome is secured by the state you occupy. Life then becomes a joyful unfolding, each day an opportunity to live in harmony with your vision. To live daily as though you were meant to win is to take your rightful place as the master of your fate. It is to embody the truth that you are the operant power, that imagination is the cause, and that assumption is the path. The more you persist in this way of being, the more natural it becomes, until victory is not something you hope for, but something you breathe. Every thought, every word, every gesture testifies to the reality of your triumph, and the world cannot help but reflect it back to you. When you live in this state consistently, winning becomes inevitable, for life has no choice but to yield to the power of your persistent assumption.